to Cherry Conversations, where we all overcome our uncertainties one conversation at a time. Each week we are joined by author, pastor, and speaker Sonny Hennessy and a special guest. And this week our guest is our friend Shelby Cox. Shelby is a wife and a mom. She is married to a guy that may rival her for great hair.
It's the same link.
Some of you know him as the kids pastor, Pastor Dallas Cox, and she's also the mom of twins Riley and Logan and big sister Kennedy. But something that a lot of you do know about Shelby is she's one of our super amazing worship leaders. And what I love about Shelby is she doesn't just lead worship, she really pastors our church in worship. And so we have her here today because we're going to be talking about worship, but we're going to be talking about it in the context of spiritual warfare, which we have talked about that a couple times. Well, it's come up in conversations that we've had. It's never necessarily been the topic.
Right. Because to have a cheery conversation about spiritual warfare is an oxymoron. Like, it's not cheery.
It's not cheery, but it's real.
But it's real.
And we don't want to shy away from some of these topics that I think maybe some people don't know a lot about it or what that means when we talk about spiritual warfare. And so we want to talk about it, how to combat it. And one way that we've talked about spiritual warfare and changing the atmosphere in our homes and in our hearts is through worship music. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And so I want to ask you, Shelby, when did you realize that worship was a really big part of your life, about changing how you feel and how you connect to God?
Well, I think when I kind of dug into why we worship is when it really kind of hit. Because, I mean, I was raised in a Christian home, and I was raised with my parents, were always in ministry. My dad's a worship pastor, and so it was kind of always a part of life. Now, granted, we didn't always have worship music playing in our home, but it was like what surrounded our every life. Church, worship, that was what we did. And we did it as a family. And so I grew up in that, but I don't think I ever really understood it and why we did it. Because like many people, I was just like, oh, worship is this type of music. And it's actually not. I mean, music is a vehicle of worship and helps to create an atmosphere of worship, but it's not actually worship itself. And so when I kind of dug into, well, what is worship and why do we worship? Well, worship is a form of obedience, but it's also a way that we can give to God. And give to God our hurts, give to God our struggles, give to God our fears. And that is a big one for me. And then when you bring up spiritual warfare, I think that brings a lot of fear. And so worship is important in that time, I think, because we need to give it to God and allow Him to kind of come in and handle that battle that's happening.
There was a term we used to use back in the day called praise and worship. Remember that?
Right.
Yeah. We don't really say praise and worship anymore. We just say worship, right? But praise and worship, I think, was this way of defining, okay, right now we're like cheery and excited and happy and we're thankful. And then worship is this time where it's reverent and it's quiet. There's some value in differentiating that and knowing that all of that is worship, that there's times when you sing a song and you're grateful, or you're in your home and you find yourself grateful. That's still worship to God. But then the other is the lamenting, is the I'm struggling, I'm not doing well. Well, is that worship when I'm like complaining to God, when I'm like questioning things? Yes, anything where you bring it. Worship is really bringing something to the altar, or, if that seems like what? Like back in the Old Testament, there was an altar and there was a presence of God there. Now, the presence of God can be anywhere we are, but to bring it at His feet or to Him and to lay down our needs, our wants, our desires, and also our gratefulness. That's all like coming to the altar. When people hear that, the altar of worship, the altar of praise, it's just laying it at His feet and going, good, bad, ugly. This is yours. And I need you. I need your help.
And letting God's power shine through that situation. Acknowledging that His power is greater. And
it almost puts us in a different level. And it's for us, really. I mean, I know God, it says He desires, He wants the praises of His people. He wants the worship of His people. But really, I know it's for me because when I worship, whether that's with music and it's at a church, it's in my home, it's in my car, whenever I do the act of worship, whenever I do the act of asking or thinking, it puts me in the layer of where I should be. It puts me right here, and then there's God right here, because sometimes I flip that around, and worship like puts me in the right level of my importance in life and to Him.
Yeah.
Well, that's so good. Okay, so let's just backtrack just a little bit. For our listeners and viewers who are maybe watching this and haven't grown up in church or around the verbiage spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
Like, explain when we say that, and we brought that up in different conversations, what does that mean? And what does that look like or feel like?
So the scripture, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. So when we are at Target and the person is rude to us, it feels like that jerk, and we can walk out mad about how they treated us. But even then, we're not wrestling against that human. We're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're wrestling against the dark presence. And the Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but rulers, principalities, the darkness. And it talks about the air. So it's this atmosphere that is not contained in a body, but is just... the enemy is fighting. But here's the great thing. It's warfare, because it's not, we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but darkness only. No, there is a wrestling that's going on our behalf, and the warfare is there's good and there's evil. There's only two. There's only two options. You're either in light or you're in darkness. Well, they're already at war in the heavenlies, in the spiritual realm, the unseen realm. And then at times when there's a crack, Satan will, not Satan because he can't be everywhere at once, but his demons, his minions, will use the mouth of people. And that's not the mouth of good, godly people unless there's a crack. And I think that's the thing we have to remember. I can be used as a tool of the enemy in your life. If I have a crack we gossip about Shelby, and then I see her and I roll my eyes. Gossip is like witchcraft. Yep. I was just used by the enemy to then steal your joy, to hurt you because I roll my eyes, but I've had this crack of ongoing negative gossip conversation about you, so now the enemy has used it. That's spiritual warfare. That's what it means. We're not wrestling against one another. He is wanting to divide, and he's wanting to kill and steal and destroy.
That's so good. And I think sometimes if people are new to this conversation, it can seem like spooky spiritual, or like very, very spiritual, but you know, we're talking about it because we can say we've experienced it. And Shelby and I had this conversation a little earlier about Cheery Conversations. What I love about this show is that we're not sharing opinion. We're sharing stories. And our guests that we have are here because we're sharing stories and testimonies and things that have happened so that we can then impact others. And so when we're talking about spiritual warfare, that can sound like a story or
like a ghost story. And you reject it or you love it, right?
Yeah. We're here to say, like, we're talking about it because we've experienced it in our lives, in our families' lives. And so that's why we're talking about it, and like how to combat that.
Right.
And so worship music is one way to do that. And Sonny, you've talked a lot about several times having that in your home, just playing. And I love how you talk about it's not like, okay, everyone sit down and listen to this song. You just have it playing in the background. So in case people haven't heard you talk about that and what it's done in your home.
Well, it's interesting. I came home from out of town a couple days ago, and the music was off, and probably because sometimes Aubrey switches it over to her phone because it can do Bluetooth speaker, and then we've got some rooms in our house connected to that. And I don't know that I noticed it was off. That's the thing about when it's playing in the atmosphere. I sensed more this in my home than I went, oh, the music's not playing. So that's interesting for one. And then that first night I was home, Sean wasn't home, and I didn't sleep. Like I felt like every few minutes I would open my eyes and look towards the door because I felt this presence. And I mean, we feel pretty protected and confident in our home, you know, but I found out the day after that there have been some kids that come over and their favorite movie is horror movies. Well, our line is, we don't even watch commercials. We'll mute it. We'll sing Mary. I mean, this sounds silly. We'll sing Mary Have Had a Little Lamb at the top of our lungs when there's a commercial, a trailer, because October is the month where there's just all of they just let loose on all of this Halloween junk. So for our kids' whole life, and even Sean and I, it'll just be us in a room watching. And if there's horror, we'll go shut your eyes and we'll mute it. We'll try to fast forward. We don't want that, because that going into our eyes is a crack in our home.
Right.
And the fact it's not muted in our home. Here's the thing. If you could think of it like this, there are these portals. There are these literal cracks that you can have in your life, you can have in your home. If you hang out with someone who is super into serial killer books and horror movies, and then they come into your house and have dinner with you, or your kids have them over, there is a great chance that demon, that spirit will be, Satan wants to stay. He's looking, how do I get in that home? How do I get on that property? So when I was told, oh yeah, one of the friends, their favorite movie is horror movie, I'm like, has that been watched in our house? Yeah. I mean, I wanted to choke every child that's my own and every child that's coming to me, because I went, that's it. For months I've been feeling this weirdness in my house, but not demonic or scary. Just this why is my home not feeling like it felt?
Yeah.
And now I know.
Yeah.
And then to feel that presence, which the enemy, he sends demons who they know when we're alone. So I already had, Sean's not laying here, that insecurity of I'm home alone. I already had that, which that just made it easier for me to just feel okay, did I hear something? And then I kept looking and I stayed awake. So Aubrey and I prayed just as we were driving into our garage. Once I knew this information yesterday, prayed, God, by the blood of Jesus, that this is our home and all of this, prayed all of the prayers, and went in the house and realized the music's not on. Why did I not notice the music's not on? Now it's not enough, just that's not gonna be it. So I turned the music on, we prayed over our house. I slept like a baby last night, felt nothing. And even when I woke up this morning, I'm like, oh, my sweet house and my sweet coffee. And I've not felt that in months. There were horror movies being watched in the basement that Sean and I weren't even aware of. And Isaiah's been struggling in the spiritual realm. Now I know. It's his friend. And I'm telling you, now Mom's going to be the enemy, I'm sure, until there's this aha moment. But we will control the atmosphere of our home. There will not be this friend over unless they would like to come to Pocket Church. I thought that's going to be the test. If they would like to join us for Pocket Church, and I'm telling you, that's not for a teenager and a teenage parent. That's not going to be the thing that they like to hear. If they'd like to be at Pocket Church, and if when they're over, they'd like to hang with Sean and Sonny, then they're welcome in our home. And there is no welcoming in our home of horror movies. Or there are shows that have been on regular TV that Sean and I were like, we can't have this going into our eyes. And it's not horror. It just, life and living water comes out of you when you put that in. And when you put funk and junk in, that's what comes out. And I don't understand why we can't just be black and white on that and understand what I'm putting in will come out and will be in my home and in my children and in my legacy, and what I put in good will come out. Period. There's no gray area in that. Sorry, I just totally hijacked your conversations to go there, but that's so crazy that happened in my home the last 2 days, and we just happened to have this on the calendar.
No, I think that's awesome. And when you talked about you might be the bad guy in the home, but we talk a lot about get your house in order. It has been months that we talked about that. And so it's important as parents, we're in charge we're in charge of setting the temperature of our homes. And so sometimes we have to be the bad guy, because sometimes our teens and our kids don't know yet what isn't good for them. What are some things you do to kind of, obviously worship music, but are there other things you do to sort of set that temperature or keep your house in order when it comes to spiritual warfare?
Well, we definitely, we have younger kids. We don't have teenagers, so. This might be, because, when you're teeny, yeah, anyways.
But you're setting the stage, which is perfect.
Yeah.
We have a bedtime routine, and part of that bedtime routine is praying with our kids, talking, about, we allow them time to, especially Kennedy, because she's 10 now, and so she'll bring up, today this happened at school. Well, before school was shut down. But today this happened at school and blah, 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 blah. And we'll have a chance to talk about that in front of the twins too. I mean, because it's good information for them to hear, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with these kids that are not Jesus people that are trying to pressure me into doing this and this and this? And, have a chance to pray with them. And we have a chance for them to ask us questions. And we tell them, don't ever be afraid to ask us questions. Even if you feel like it's something that you could get in trouble with, if you come to us and ask us about it first, then, it's good conversation.
So good.
So we have that time in every day, every night with them, so that
I love it. And you obviously give yourself time for that. You're not get the kids to bed within 3 minutes because our show's starting.
Yeah,
right.
And we're just gonna Jesus be with them tonight, let them sleep while I'm in. That's the thing. That amount of prayer is about as much covering and protection as they're going to have. I love that. Obviously, you give them time.
Well, and
you give yourself
us time
yes.
too, because when we come home, some people say, have it at the dinner table, blah blah blah. Well, my kids don't want to. They don't want to talk at the dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to talk about that at the dinner table.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when we come home, it's kind of sometimes I feel like I walk into chaos. So even last night I walked in and I finished doing what I normally do, clean up the house, and then I start dinner. And usually by the time I start dinner, I'm like, Dallas, you need to come home right now because I'm going to lose my mind because I can't get dinner done. And this child wants this, and this child's asking for this, and this one's upstairs doing this. And I just put on worship music, and it was super peaceful. None of the kids were doing anything crazy. It was just calm and peaceful. And he walked in and I was like, everything's okay. It's all right. We're good. No big deal. But it's amazing to think the shift in the atmosphere that simple thing creates, because and it was our worship CD.
Which is amazing. Our newest one. Woo.
Yeah, it's great.
And I think so I'll ask you this question. Why is worship music so powerful? Is it because it doesn't have swear words in it? Is it because there's not a lot of drums? Well, there are drums, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Is it because it's a different style? Or is it because of... Well, I know that when I'm feeling like there's spiritual warfare or something icky in my house, I will verbally just say the word Jesus because there's power in that. So why is there so much power in worship music?
Well, I think because music in itself is an emotionally driven,
Yes.
they've done studies on even just instrumentally, music alone kind of drives this emotional feeling and all that. There are a lot of times when I can't pinpoint what's happening, or when I can't pinpoint what exactly I need to pray about or say out loud, and so when I put on worship music, through that and through the words that someone else has experienced, and they've written it down in this sequence that makes sense to me and gets in my spirit, then I'm able to it kind of brings up this, okay, now I know I need to pray about this. Now I know, yes, that is exactly how I'm feeling, what these words are saying right now. And so that for me is why it is important in my life and in our house.
And because there's so many different styles of people and minds, that for you is what you get from it. That's how I would say it.
Yeah.
Then there's people who are songwriters.
Right.
Like Brian Russo writes songs.
Right.
So he's actually saying this stuff, and he's pouring out probably what he couldn't say, but he can say in a song. And then for those of us who, I use my words all the time. I'm an external processor, and so I probably wear people out with my words. So for me, what worship does is it settles my brain down, and it makes me quit letting the words come out or scramble in my head.
It refocuses
It refocuses me. And all music, like you said, there's been studies done. All music has a spirit, and it's the spirit of the studio in which it was recorded. There's a spirit of the people who wrote it. Sean could rattle this off. One of the great rock bands, they would do seances before they'd record each song.
The Beatles. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
I don't think it's the Beatles. Sorry, Beatles. Are they still alive? Any of them? I don't know. It was one of the rock bands, and I'm sure that was not just them, because there were studies, and I remember when it was like backmasking. If you play backwards, it says worship Satan, and that was an era where it was like parents were saying you've got to be careful what your kids listen to.
Right.
But there's also been studies that like the Columbine thing came from the shooters. Loved this kind of music, or these people committed suicide and these were the lyrics of the song they had been listening to that they wrote in their suicide note. And what Satan does, this is what he's so good at, stinking Satan, is that he makes us all go, that's not true.
Oh, yeah.
That's not true. Yeah. There is a spirit behind every song, good or bad, and it's good or evil. Again, black or white. This song is good or this song is evil. And you go, well, what about Jack Johnson? Like, what about, didn't he do Curious George show? Like, what about his music? And I'd say there are people who they sing not worship music, but you have heard, like I heard they're a believer, and their music sounds really good. Danny Goki, before he went back to worship, he'd just play regular music, and there were a few others. And you could tell that, that doesn't give me like a anxiety, because there is a spirit behind all music. Right. So you're pretty safe and blessed when it's worship that you're after.
Right. That's so good. I met Danny Goki.
I brought him up because of you. She's a did you know he just sang like on a prayer and worship thing in DC?
I didn't.
Yep, he led worship.
Oh my gosh.
You'll have to go back and watch.
I'm a fan. That's so good. And so I just think it's so good as a reminder. I mean, because, like, let's be honest, our teenage kids are at a point will be like, I'm not going to just listen to Christian music all the time. But we still are the parent, and we still need to help them understand the why.
We're guiding them.
Yeah, we're guiding them. And they'll make their choices. I believe that when, as parents, we're guiding them and really not just this is the rule, but here's the why. They know when things are in their ear and not good.
Yes.
God is speaking to them too.
Yeah. And praying for our kids.
Yeah.
I'm going to a new level and a depth of praying for my kids because I could always handle my kids.
Yeah.
I could handle that we don't do this, we do this. Well, now when their spirits are kind of on their own, they can make more of their own decisions, and they are teenagers headed out the door. I'm not going to be the parent that says, well, when you're 18, you can live how you want, but until now. And so they're just putting in their time for the next 2 years, and then they're going to go live like hell. I would rather walk through it, like you said. They are our kids, and I can pray for them. I'm praying that there's a breaking in both my kids from even liking crappy music.
Yeah.
Like, that's my goal. I swear a little.
That's a little. We do a beep. Okay, let's leave with this. So let's kind of like wrap it back around so we can help maybe listeners who maybe haven't totally been into the worship music scene. So they're like, well, I don't even know what to listen to. What are you listening to right now, Shelby?
Nothing Else by Life Church Cafe.
Yes, it's so good. I'm not just saying that.
No, it really is.
It really is.
It really
it's
is.
our best.
And so many great songs on that album. I listen to that one frequently. I also listen to Hillsong's newest album. I think it's called Awake. I just know that song is on there.
Yeah.
It's got all the colors, the rainbowy colors.
Oh, that's
really
a little
good.
old. She's just catching up.
Is that really old?
Yep. I wore that
thought it
thing
just-
out a couple years ago. I'm pretty sure.
No, that just came out like
Maybe-
2019.
yeah, maybe
maybe.
Okay, I wore it out immediately.
Yeah. I always have Elevation.
They're good.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we pick a lot of our songs
That's where
from.
she picks a lot of her songs.
I do.
She's a big part of that.
Do you have a go-to song for like, man, I'm feeling like, what's my go-to song? What's your go-to song? And I'm sure it changes.
I don't. It does. It depends on the mood. It depends on what I'm fighting, what I'm dealing with. Sometimes it's something from Maverick City because I need a little bit of that,
Love
that
them.
like, like deep but like gospel-y sounding music. You know what I mean? Like if you haven't heard them, they're pretty great.
So good.
And then sometimes I need something that's a little more like am I saying this right?
Introspective.
Introspective. And then sometimes I need something that's a little like, I need a pick-me-up because I'm feeling really down right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it depends.
That's
It
good.
depends
Love
on...
it.
Do you have a go-to? A song or just a...
Whenever Hillsong comes out, I wear it out. They're my favorite. They really are. Bethel, certain ones. Elevation, I usually wear their album out. I feel like I wear albums out. Now I'm wearing ours out. And the problem is when you wear them out, literally you just, they become white noise because I've listened for so many months that I need something new that shocks me into like the words. What about you?
I love all of those as well, and my go-to always changes. And so right now my go-to is It Is So, Elevation. Just the words of that song are so good and just so full of authority in that what God says happens. Like we can be confident in that.
I definitely love it when a song gives you the opportunity to like claim God's glory and God's victory over something that's going on. Like one of those, like I love songs that are like, let me slap the devil in the face.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like I get
Yeah.
excited about those. So I'm like, stomp on the devil's head.
I love it.
That's so great. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for letting us kind of share a lot. But thank you so much, Shelby, for just sharing your heart, and also thank you for sharing a clear gift of
that you
worship
have.
with our church and with everyone who gets an opportunity to see it.
We are so glad you're a part of our life and Cherry Conversations. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can go to sonnyhennessy.com, and maybe you have an idea for a show, a subject. I loved this subject, so go to sonnyhennessy.com.
And we'll see you next week at the same time for another Cherry Conversation.